The spotlight hit Kai like 1,000 accusations as he stood at the podium, medals gleaming on his chest from the biggest drug bust in New York history. With a deep breath that shook his entire frame, he reached into the front row, pulled Alexander Rivera to his side, and declared into the microphone, "This is my boyfriend, the man who kept me alive through every lie I had to tell," before leaning in and kissing him fully in front of the commissioner, the mayor, and every detective in the department. Gasps rippled through the ballroom like a shockwave. Cameras flashed so rapidly the room turned into a strobe light. Alexander's hand tightened on Kai's waist, surprise and love colliding in his dark eyes. But he did not pull away. In that single heartbeat, everything Kai had buried for 3 years exploded into the open. The undercover operation that had consumed his life, the cartel he had infiltrated as a straight, no-nonsense detective named Tommy Reyes. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his real identity, all of it cracked wide open under the bright chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel. He could feel the stares boring into him, the whispers already starting. Captain Harlan, his boss for the last decade, sat frozen with his glass halfway to his lips. Kai's own father, retired Sergeant Thompson, stood near the back, face draining of color. Yet Kai did not regret it. Not yet. Because right then, holding Alexander close, he felt lighter than he had in years. The kiss lasted only seconds, but the silence that followed stretched forever. Then the commissioner cleared his throat and stepped forward, forcing a professional smile. "Well, Detective Thompson, that was unexpected. But your work on Operation Shadowfall was exemplary. The city owes you a debt." The applause that followed was polite, scattered, uncertain. Kai kept his arm around Alexander's shoulders as they stepped down from the stage together. In the hallway outside the ballroom, away from the crowd, Alexander turned to him, voice low and trembling. "Kai, what the hell was that? You could lose everything. Your badge, your family, the whole team." His eyes searched Kai's face, worry etched deep. "I thought we agreed to wait until the case was completely closed." Kai ran a hand through his short brown hair, the adrenaline still surging. "I couldn't wait anymore, Alex. Every night I came home and lied about where I'd been, who I'd been with. I watched you almost walk away last month because the secrecy was killing us both. Tonight, when they called my name, I realized the only thing I was truly afraid of losing was you." He pulled Alexander into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with the faint trace of classroom chalk. "I'm done hiding." Before Alexander could answer, Kai's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was a text from an unknown number, but the code at the end was unmistakable, one only a handful of people in the department knew. "Boss just called in. Wants to talk. Says the deal is done." Kai's stomach dropped. The cartel's leader, Victor Morales, had been arrested 2 days earlier based on evidence Kai had risked his life to gather. The case was supposed to be wrapped, but this message meant something bigger was happening. Alexander noticed the change in his expression. "What is it?" "Something's off," Kai muttered. "The case, it's not over yet." He looked back toward the ballroom doors where reporters were already spilling out, phones raised. The public kiss had just gone viral, and somehow that visibility was about to trigger the final domino. They slipped into a side conference room, the door clicking shut behind them. Kai paced while Alexander watched, arms crossed. "You remember the night we met?" Kai asked suddenly, voice softening. 3 years earlier, in a quiet Brooklyn bar called The Anchor, far from the precincts and the danger. Alexander had been grading papers at a corner table, glasses perched on his nose, looking every bit the high school history teacher he was. Kai, still in his early undercover days, had walked in exhausted and ordered a beer. Their eyes met across the room, and something clicked that neither could explain. "You spilled your drink trying to look cool," Alexander teased gently, the memory easing the tension for a moment. "I thought you were just another cocky cop. Then you started talking about wanting to make the world safer for kids like the ones I teach." And I knew you were different. Kai stopped pacing and leaned against the table. I fell in love with you that night, Alex. But the deeper I went into the cartel, the more I had to become Tommy Reyes. Straight, single, loyal only to the job. I missed your birthday last year because I was in a warehouse in Queens listening to Morales plan his next shipment. I watched you cry on our anniversary because I couldn't tell you why I was gone. The guilt ate me alive. Alexander stepped closer, placing a hand on Kai's chest. I stayed because I saw the man underneath the lies. But tonight you just blew up your entire world. What happens when your father walks through that door? Or when the department pulls your badge? Before Kai could answer, the door burst open. Captain Harlan stood there, face flushed. Thompson, my office. Now. And bring your friend. The word came out strained. Kai and Alexander followed him through the corridors, the weight of what he had done settling heavier with every step. In the captain's office, the television was already showing footage of the kiss looping on every local channel. Harlan slammed the door. You want to explain why my best undercover just outed himself on live television during the biggest press event of the year? Kai met his gaze steadily. Because it was time, sir. I couldn't keep pretending. Harlan rubbed his temples. You know what this means for your career. Internal affairs will be all over this. The press is going to spin it every way possible. He paused, then lowered his voice. But something strange just happened. Morales' lawyer called. Said the boss wants to cut a full deal, confess everything, including names we never even suspected. He saw the news clip and apparently decided the game was up. Your little stunt just gave us the leverage we needed to close the entire network tonight. Kai blinked, stunned. The major case, the one that had nearly cost him his relationship and his sanity, was ending because of the very truth he had been terrified to reveal. Alexander squeezed his hand, silent support in the chaos. Outside the window, the New York skyline glittered, indifferent to the personal earthquake that had just shaken Kai's life. He turned to Alexander, heart racing with a mixture of fear and relief. Looks like we're just getting started. The captain cleared his throat again. Go home, both of you. We'll sort this out tomorrow. But Thompson, you better be ready for what comes next. As they left the building together, hand in hand for the first time in public, Kai felt the first real breath of freedom he had known in years. Yet deep down he knew the hardest battles, the ones with his family, his colleagues, and his own doubts, were only beginning. The cab ride back to their apartment in Queens was quiet at first, the city lights streaking past the windows like blurred memories. Alexander kept his hand on Kai's knee, thumb tracing small circles, but Kai could feel the questions building. You really did that, Alexander finally said, voice soft but steady. In front of everyone. No warning. Kai leaned his head back against the seat. I planned it for weeks, actually. Every time I looked at the commendation invitation, I pictured this moment. I just didn't know how it would feel until it happened. He turned to face Alexander, the streetlights catching the earnest lines of his face. Remember when we almost broke up 6 months ago? You told me you couldn't keep being my secret anymore. That night I sat in my car outside the apartment for an hour, staring at the door, terrified I'd lost you forever. Alexander nodded, eyes glistening. I packed a bag that night. I thought if I left, maybe you'd finally choose yourself. But then you came inside and held me like the world was ending. You promised things would change after the case. I believed you because I love you, Kai. But love isn't enough if it keeps breaking us. The cab pulled up to their brownstone, the same one they had moved into together 2 years earlier under the pretense that Alexander was just a roommate. Kai paid the driver and they climbed the stairs in silence. Inside, the living room felt different, as if the walls themselves were watching. Kai dropped his keys on the table and pulled Alexander into his arms. It's changing now. All of it. They sat on the couch, the television muted on the news channel still replaying the kiss. Kai stared at the screen, seeing himself from the outside. The man in uniform looked strong, confident. The man inside had been drowning for years. "My dad's probably calling every contact he has right now," Kai said quietly. "Sergeant Thompson's golden boy just turned out to be gay. He never even suspected. I made sure of that." Alexander rested his head on Kai's shoulder. "You don't have to face him alone. I'll be right there." Kai closed his eyes, letting the warmth of Alexander's presence ground him. He thought back to their first real date, a rainy Saturday in Central Park. They had shared an umbrella and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Alexander had spoken about his students, the ones who struggled with their own identities, and Kai had listened, feeling seen for the first time. That night, when they kissed under the shelter of a gazebo, Kai knew he had found home. But home came with complications. The next morning Kai had received his first deep cover assignment. He told Alexander he would be traveling for work, a vague consulting gig. The lies started small and grew until they formed a cage around their relationship. Late-night calls from burner phones, sudden disappearances, birthdays missed because Morales demanded loyalty tests. Kai had watched Alexander's trust fray like old rope. "I almost told you the truth 100 times, Kai whispered now. "But every time I opened my mouth, I saw the danger. If Morales ever found out I had a boyfriend, he would have used you against me. I couldn't risk your life." Alexander lifted his head, eyes fierce. "You risked our life together instead. Every day you came home smelling like warehouse smoke and fear. I felt you slipping away. I started volunteering more at the LGBTQ youth center just to feel like I was doing something real. Those kids reminded me why you do what you do. But they also showed me what happens when people hide too long." Kai pulled him closer, their foreheads touching. "I saw those kids in my mind every time I had to flirt with some cartel girlfriend to keep cover. It made me sick. But I kept going because I believed finishing the case would give us the future we deserved. Tonight proved I was right and wrong at the same time." The phone rang, shattering the moment. Kai glanced at the caller ID, Dad. He let it go to voicemail, but the message played on speaker anyway. "Kai, it's your father. Call me. Now." The voice was clipped, the same tone he had used when Kai was 16 and got caught skipping school. Alexander squeezed his hand. "We'll call him together in the morning. You're not that scared kid anymore." Kai nodded, but inside the old fears swirled. His father had raised him on stories of police brotherhood, of men who stood shoulder to shoulder without weakness. Coming out meant shattering that image. Yet looking at Alexander, at the quiet strength in his eyes, Kai felt something new take root. Resolve. They moved to the bedroom, not for passion but for comfort. Lying side by side in the dark, Alexander traced the scar on Kai's ribs from a knife fight during the Undercover days. "Tell me what happens tomorrow," he said softly. "Internal review, probably. Maybe suspension while they investigate. The press will dig into everything. But the case closing tonight, that was real. Morales flipping because he saw me kiss you? It's like the universe decided my truth was the final piece." Kai laughed quietly, the sound surprised even him. "I spent years pretending to be someone else to catch bad guys. Turns out being myself caught the last one." Alexander smiled against his shoulder. "Then maybe it was worth it." Sleep came slowly, wrapped in each other's arms. Kai dreamed of the warehouse where he had first met Morales, of the fear that had lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. He woke once to the sound of Alexander breathing steadily beside him and realized for the first time in years he was not afraid of the morning. Dawn brought the first wave of messages. Colleagues texting everything from support to confusion. One detective wrote, "Proud of you, man. Didn't see it coming but respect." Another simply sent a question mark. Kai read them all while Alexander made coffee, the normalcy of the routine feeling revolutionary. When the doorbell rang at 8 o'clock, Kai already knew who it would be. His father stood on the stoop, face set in the hard lines Kai remembered from childhood. "We need to talk, son." Kai stepped aside, letting him in. Alexander stayed in the kitchen, giving them space but staying close enough to be there if needed. The conversation that followed was raw, filled with questions Kai had dreaded for years. "How long?" his father asked, voice cracking. "Why didn't you trust me?" "Because I didn't trust myself," Kai answered honestly. "I thought being gay would make me weak in your eyes, in the department's eyes. But hiding almost destroyed me." His father stared at the floor for a long moment. "I raised you to be strong. Maybe I forgot strong comes in different shapes." It was not acceptance, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. Later that afternoon, Captain Harlan called. "The DA wants you in for a debrief." Morales started singing like a bird after the news hit. "Your personal life just became department legend." There was a hint of reluctant admiration in his voice. Kai hung up and found Alexander waiting in the living room. "We did it," he said, pulling him close. "The case is closed, and so is the chapter where I lived two lives." But even as relief washed over him, Kai knew the real work was just beginning. Rebuilding trust with his father, facing the precinct, learning how to be openly gay in a world that had rewarded his secrecy. Alexander rested his head on Kai's chest, and for the first time the future felt wide open instead of hidden. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of interviews, meetings, and quiet evenings where they talked until the sun rose. Kai discovered colleagues who had suspected all along and friends who stepped up with unexpected support. He also faced whispers and sidelong glances that stung more than he expected. Through it all, Alexander remained his anchor, reminding him daily that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to move forward anyway. One evening they walked hand in hand through Central Park, the same place where their first date had happened. The leaves were turning gold, and the air carried the promise of change. Kai stopped under the familiar gazebo and turned to Alexander. "I love you. Not as a secret. Not as a risk. Just as me." Alexander's smile lit up the fading light. "That's all I ever wanted." In that moment, with the city humming around them, Kai understood the true cost and the true reward of the choice he had made on that stage. The case had ended, but their story was only beginning. Weeks turned into a delicate new rhythm. Kai reported to the precinct each morning without the weight of double identity. Yet the stares followed him like shadows. Some detectives clapped him on the back with genuine respect. Others avoided eye contact in the locker room. Captain Harlan kept him on desk duty pending a full review, but the paperwork felt lighter knowing the cartel was dismantled. Morales's confession had unraveled an entire network stretching from Queens to Miami, and the district attorney credited Kai's unexpected publicity as the catalyst that loosened the final tongue. Alexander's classroom became a sanctuary. He taught his students about civil rights and personal courage, weaving in stories that never named Kai but clearly drew from their life. One afternoon, a student stayed after class, a quiet 16-year-old boy struggling with his own identity. "Mr. Rivera, how do you know when it's safe to tell people who you really are?" the boy asked. Alexander thought of Kai standing on that stage and answered, "When the alternative hurts more than the truth." That night, he recounted the conversation to Kai over dinner. "You gave that kid hope without even knowing it," Alexander said, passing the salad. Kai smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. The voicemail from his father still sat unanswered on his phone. The call finally came on a rainy Thursday. "Dinner at the house. Your mother wants to meet him." The hesitation in his father's voice was small but noticeable. Kai agreed, nerves twisting in his stomach. Alexander squeezed his hand across the table. "We faced this together, remember?" The Thompson family home in Staten Island looked exactly as Kai remembered. American flag on the porch, basketball hoop in the driveway, the smell of pot roast greeting them at the door. His mother hugged him tightly, then turned to Alexander with careful warmth. "We've heard a lot about you," she said, voice steady. Dinner passed in polite conversation about school and police work, but the tension simmered beneath every word. After the meal, Kai's father led him to the garage, the old ritual space for serious talks. "I've been thinking," he began, hands in his pockets. "When you were little, I taught you to never back down from a fight. I just never figured the hardest fight would be with yourself." He paused, eyes glistening. "I'm not saying I understand everything, but I'm saying I'm trying. Because you're my son." Kai felt something crack open inside his chest. He pulled his father into a hug, the first real one in years. "That's all I need, Dad." Back home that night, Alexander listened as Kai recounted the conversation, tears finally falling after weeks of holding them in. "I thought coming out would end my family," Kai whispered. "Instead it might save it." Alexander held him through the emotion, their bodies fitting together like pieces finally aligned. The department review board met the following Monday. Kai sat across from 3 senior officers, Alexander waiting outside. They asked about judgment, about risk to operations, about whether his personal life had compromised the investigation. Kai answered honestly, "My personal life was the only thing that kept me human during 3 years of pretending to be someone I wasn't. If anything, it made me more determined to finish the job right." The board deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, Captain Harlan read the decision. "Effective immediately, you are reinstated to active duty. No disciplinary action. The commissioner believes your actions, while unorthodox, ultimately served the department." A small smile tugged at Harlan's mouth. "Off the record, a lot of us are proud of you, Thompson." Outside, Alexander jumped up when he saw Kai's face. "Well, back on the job," Kai said, grinning for the first time in weeks. They celebrated with takeout on the couch, planning a real vacation now that the danger was gone. But Kai's mind kept drifting to the loose ends still bothering him. One name from Morales' confession had not been accounted for. A dirty contact inside the department who had fed information to the cartel. The investigation was ongoing, and Kai could not shake the feeling that his public reveal had painted a target on both their backs. The next morning, a plain envelope arrived at the apartment. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Alexander leaving the youth center the previous day. On the back, handwritten, "Secrets have consequences." Kai's blood ran cold. He called Harlan immediately. "We have a problem." Alexander looked at the photo and his face paled. "The case is supposed to be over." "Not for everyone," Kai replied, already reaching for his service weapon. The growth he had fought for, the openness he had claimed, now carried a new kind of risk. Yet looking at Alexander, he knew he would not trade the truth for safety. They spent the evening reinforcing locks and talking through worst-case scenarios. Alexander refused to hide again. "We've come too far," he said firmly. "Whatever comes, we face it as us." Kai pulled him close, the steady beat of Alexander's heart reminding him why the fight mattered. Days blurred into cautious vigilance. Kai worked with internal affairs, tracing the threat. Alexander continued teaching, refusing to let fear dim his light. One evening they attended a small gathering at the youth center where Alexander volunteered. Kai stood in the back, watching his boyfriend inspire teenagers who looked at him with awe. In that moment Kai understood the full circle. His courage had not only freed himself but created space for others. The breakthrough came during a late-night strategy session at the precinct. A junior detective uncovered the dirty contact. A sergeant who had been on Morales' payroll for years. The arrest happened quietly the next morning. When the sergeant was led past Kai's desk in handcuffs, he spat. "Your little performance cost me everything." Kai met his glare evenly. "No. Your choices cost you everything. I just stopped hiding mine." That night, with the final threat neutralized, Kai and Alexander walked the Brooklyn Bridge, city lights reflecting on the water. "We made it," Alexander said softly. Kai stopped, turning to face him. "We're just beginning." The months that followed brought normalcy they had never known. Date nights without looking over their shoulders. Family dinners where his father asked genuine questions about Alexander's work. colleagues who invited them to barbecues without awkwardness. Kai discovered that living openly required its own kind of bravery, one that grew stronger each day. Alexander planned a surprise weekend getaway to the Hamptons, a small cottage overlooking the ocean. They walked the beach at sunset, waves lapping at their feet. "I never thought we'd have this," Kai admitted, stopping to pull Alexander into his arms. "Thank you for waiting while I found the courage." Alexander kissed him softly. "Thank you for choosing us when it mattered most." Back in the city, life settled into a rhythm of shared mornings and quiet evenings. Kai mentored new recruits, emphasizing integrity above all. Alexander expanded the support program at school, using their story anonymously to help students navigate their own truths. Together they became proof that love could survive secrecy, prejudice, and even the dangers of undercover work. Yet Kai carried one lingering question. Had the price been worth every tear, every lie, every moment of doubt? Looking at Alexander asleep beside him each night, the answer was always yes. Spring arrived with new beginnings. Kai returned to street patrols, the familiar weight of the badge now carrying different meaning. No more double life, no more burner phones. His partner on the job, a veteran named Ramirez, had become an unexpected ally. "Took guts, what you did," Ramirez said one afternoon over coffee. "My brother's gay. Never told anyone on the job. You made it a little easier for guys like him." Kai nodded, the words settling warm in his chest. Alexander students organized a small pride event at the school, inviting Kai as a guest speaker. Standing in front of 30 teenagers, Kai spoke about the night he chose truth over safety. "I spent years thinking my job required me to hide," he told them. "But real strength is bringing your whole self to the table." The applause that followed felt different from the commendation ceremony, more personal, more earned. Afterward, a girl approached him shyly. "My dad's a cop too. He says people like you make the force look bad." Kai knelt to her level. "Tell him people like me make the force honest." Alexander watched from the doorway, pride shining in his eyes. That evening they cooked dinner together, the kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of garlic. "You're changing lives," Alexander said, chopping vegetables. "Not just mine." Kai wrapped his arms around him from behind. "We're changing them together." The following weekend they drove upstate to visit Alexander's parents in Albany. The Riveras had always been warm, but the public reveal had still surprised them. Over homemade empanadas, Alexander's mother hugged Kai tightly. "We always knew you were family. Now the world knows too." His father clapped Kai on the back. "Just keep my boy happy, detective." The acceptance felt complete, a balm after the rocky start with his own dad. Back in New York, Kai received an invitation to speak at the police academy about integrity and mental health. He accepted, bringing Alexander as his guest. Standing at the podium once more, this time without medals but with purpose, Kai shared the full story. "I almost lost everything pretending to be someone I wasn't. Don't make my mistakes." The cadets listened in rapt silence. Afterward, several approached with personal stories of their own. Alexander waited outside, leaning against the car. "You're good at this," he said as Kai approached. "Being you." Kai pulled him close, kissing him right there in the parking lot. No fear, no glances over the shoulder. Just them. Summer brought heat waves and quiet evenings on their rooftop. They talked about the future, maybe adopting one day, maybe buying a house with a yard. Kai still carried his service weapon, but the threats now came from regular police work, not from hiding who he loved. One night a call came in about a domestic dispute. Kai responded with Ramirez, de-escalating the situation calmly. When they returned to the precinct, Ramirez grinned. "You're different now. Lighter. It looks good on you." Alexander met him after shift with takeout and a new book about gay history. They read passages aloud, discussing how far society had come and how much further it needed to go. "We're part of that progress," Alexander said softly. Kai nodded, tracing patterns on his hand. Fall arrived with changing leaves and a new case that tested Kai's growth. A young officer struggling with his own identity reached out after hearing Kai's academy talk. They met for coffee, and Kai listened as the officer described the same fears he had once carried. "It gets better," Kai promised. "But only if you let it." The conversation reminded him daily of why the risk had been worth it. One crisp October evening, they attended a charity gala for the youth center. Dressed in suits, they danced slowly to a jazz band, ignoring the occasional curious glances. "Remember our first dance?" Alexander whispered. "In the kitchen after that awful Undercover week." Kai smiled. "I remember thinking I'd never deserve you." "You always did," Alexander replied. The holidays brought both families together for the first time. Thanksgiving at the Thompson house was loud and imperfect, with Kai's father carving the turkey and Alexander's mother sharing recipes. Laughter filled the dining room, and for a moment Kai saw the family he had always wanted. His father even raised a glass to new traditions. Christmas morning they exchanged gifts on the living room floor. Alexander gave Kai a custom plaque engraved with the date of the ceremony and the words, "The day you chose us." Kai gave Alexander plane tickets to California for a winter getaway. "No secrets, no cases, just us," he said. New Year's Eve found them on the Brooklyn Bridge again, watching fireworks explode over the harbor. As the clock struck midnight, Kai turned to Alexander. "3 years ago I fell in love with you in secret. This year I get to love you in the open. Happy New Year, Alex." They kissed as the city celebrated around them, the past year's pain fading into the night. The following months solidified their life together. Kai received a promotion to detective sergeant, leading a community outreach program. Alexander expanded his support group, using Kai's story as inspiration without naming names. They bought a small house in Queens with a backyard big enough for future dreams. Yet growth is never linear. One spring afternoon Kai received a letter from an old cartel associate still serving time. The man wrote simply, "You taught me something. Truth matters." Kai read it aloud to Alexander that night. "Even the bad guys saw it," he said softly. Alexander smiled. "Everyone sees it now." Their love had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, a testament to the power of honesty. Kai no longer woke with the weight of lies. Instead he woke grateful, ready to face whatever the day brought with the man he loved beside him. The journey from undercover shadows to open sunlight had been long, but every step had led them here. Summer returned, hotter than the year before, but their home felt cooler with the new air conditioning and the peace they had built. Kai's days now included mentoring sessions at the academy and community meetings where he spoke openly about mental health in law enforcement. Young officers approached him after every talk, sharing stories that mirrored his own past struggles. Each conversation reinforced the decision he had made on that stage. Truth had not destroyed his career. It had redefined it. Alexander's school year ended with a special award for his work with at-risk students. At the ceremony, the principal mentioned the positive role model Alexander had become for the entire faculty. Kai sat in the front row, clapping louder than anyone. Afterward, they celebrated with ice cream in the park, the same park where their story had begun. "We've come full circle," Alexander said, licking chocolate from his spoon. Kai grinned. "And the circle keeps getting bigger." Family gatherings became routine. Kai's father now called every Sunday, asking about work and about Alexander's students. The conversations still held careful pauses, but the love underneath was unmistakable. Alexander's parents visited often, bringing food and laughter that filled the house. One weekend they all attended a Yankees game together, cheering in the stands like any other family. Kai caught his father smiling at him and Alexander holding hands and felt a quiet triumph. Work brought new challenges that tested Kai's growth daily. A high-profile corruption case landed on his desk, involving officers who had once trained him. The investigation required long hours and delicate interviews. Alexander waited up each night, listening without judgment as Kai processed the moral complexities. "You're the one who taught me that doing the right thing isn't always easy," Alexander reminded him one exhausted evening. Kai kissed his forehead. "And you taught me I don't have to do it alone." Their relationship deepened in the small moments. Saturday morning runs along the East River, Sunday brunches where they planned future trips, quiet evenings reading side by side. Kai discovered he loved cooking for Alexander, experimenting with recipes that often ended in laughter and takeout. Alexander surprised him with tickets to Broadway shows, knowing how much Kai needed culture after years of darkness. One August evening they hosted a small barbecue for close friends and colleagues. Ramirez brought his wife and brother, the same brother he had mentioned months earlier. The group laughed around the grill, stories flowing freely. Kai watched Alexander move easily among the guests, completely himself, and realized this was the life he had fought for. Fall brought cooler air and a new chapter. Alexander proposed expanding the youth program citywide, and Kai volunteered to help with security workshops. Their first joint event drew over 200 teenagers. Kai spoke about resilience. Alexander spoke about hope. The standing ovation that followed felt like validation for every sacrifice. Winter arrived with snow and reflection. On the anniversary of the commendation ceremony, they returned to the Plaza Hotel. The same ballroom looked different in daylight, empty and peaceful. Kai stood on the stage where everything had changed. "Best decision I ever made," he said softly. Alexander joined him, slipping an arm around his waist. "Best day of my life." They spent Christmas in California this time, walking beaches and watching sunsets. Kai proposed on the last night, kneeling in the sand with a simple ring. "Will you keep walking through every storm with me?" Alexander's yes was immediate, tears mixing with ocean spray. They celebrated with champagne on the balcony, planning a small wedding for spring. Back in New York, wedding preparations brought both families closer. Kai's father offered to walk him down the aisle alongside Alexander's mother. The gesture meant more than words could express. Alexander chose a navy suit. Kai chose charcoal. They wrote their own vows, promising honesty above all else. Spring bloomed with cherry blossoms and final details. The ceremony was held in Central Park, surrounded by friends, family, and the youth group they had helped. When the officiant asked if they took each other, the answer was unanimous. Their first kiss as husbands felt like coming home after the longest undercover mission. The reception lasted late into the night. Kai danced with his father, Alexander with his mother. Toasts celebrated courage and love conquering fear. As the music played, Kai pulled Alexander close. "We did it," he whispered. "We built the life we dreamed about when everything seemed impossible." Summer brought their honeymoon to Italy, weeks of exploring ancient cities and learning that joy could be this effortless. They returned tanned and rested, ready for the next phase. Kai continued his outreach work. Alexander launched the citywide program, their house filled with plans and possibility. One quiet evening on the porch, Kai turned to Alexander. "If I could go back, I'd still choose the same path. Every lie, every fear, every risk led me here." Alexander smiled. "And I'd wait for you all over again." Their story had become more than a personal victory. It inspired colleagues, students, and strangers who reached out through social media. Kai answered every message, sharing what he had learned. Authenticity is not weakness. It is the ultimate strength. As another year turned, they stood on the Brooklyn Bridge once more, watching the city lights. Kai realized the major case had never been about the cartel. It had always been about finding himself. With Alexander's hand in his, the future stretched bright and honest before them. Years passed in a tapestry of ordinary miracles. Kai rose to lieutenant, heading the Community Relations Division where openness became policy rather than exception. Alexander's program reached thousands of students across 5 boroughs, creating safe spaces that echoed their own hard-won journey. They adopted a daughter, a bright-eyed 7-year-old named Sophia who called them both Papa and filled their home with questions and laughter. Kai watched Alexander help Sophia with homework at the kitchen table and felt the full weight of everything they had overcome. The nights of secrecy, the public backlash, the internal battles, all of it had been preparation for moments like this. Sophia asked one evening why some families had 2 dads. Alexander answered simply, "Because love comes in every shape, and ours chose each other every single day." Kai's heart swelled with pride. Family traditions grew richer. Thanksgiving now included both extended families and several of Sophia's friends from the youth program. Kai's father told stories of his own police days while Alexander's mother taught everyone to make flan. Laughter filled the rooms, erasing old tensions. Work continued to challenge and reward them. Kai mentored officers navigating their own identities, using his experience as a roadmap. Alexander expanded the program to include parent workshops, helping families understand what Kai's father had slowly learned. Together they spoke at national conferences, sharing their story not for applause but for the teenagers in the audience who needed to hear it. One crisp autumn day they returned to the Plaza Hotel ballroom for a charity event honoring community heroes. The same stage where Kai had revealed everything now hosted a panel on inclusion. Kai spoke last, voice steady. "I once thought hiding would protect me. Instead it nearly cost me the best parts of my life. Today I stand here as a husband, a father, and a better officer because I chose truth." The applause was thunderous, but the real reward was Alexander's hand in his and Sophia waving from the front row. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, they sat on the porch with coffee. "Remember the night everything changed?" Alexander asked. Kai smiled. "How could I forget? One kiss ended a case and started our real life." They talked late into the night about the road ahead. Sophia's soccer games, retirement plans, perhaps another child. The conversation flowed easily, built on years of honesty. Kai realized the internal conflict that once raged inside him had transformed into quiet strength. Winter brought snow and cozy nights reading by the fire. Sophia asked for stories about how her dads met. Kai told the version suitable for small ears, leaving out the danger but keeping the magic. Alexander added details about the umbrella in Central Park. Sophia listened wide-eyed, then declared, "I want a love like that someday." Kai and Alexander exchanged a glance full of shared understanding. Spring arrived with their 10th anniversary. They renewed their vows in the same park gazebo, Sophia scattering petals. Friends and family surrounded them, a living testament to the power of courage. Kai looked at Alexander and saw the same man who had stood beside him through every storm. Only now their love had roots deep enough to weather anything. Summer brought family vacations to the beach where they had once dreamed of freedom. Sophia built sandcastles while Kai and Alexander walked the shoreline hand in hand. "We made it," Kai said simply. Alexander squeezed his hand. "We keep making it, every day." As the years continued, their influence spread. Kai's outreach program became a national model. Alexander's foundation received awards for changing lives. Yet the greatest achievement remained their home, filled with love, honesty, and the quiet certainty that choosing truth had been the right decision. One quiet evening on their porch, now with gray in their hair and Sophia grown into a confident teenager, Kai turned to Alexander. "If I had to do it all again, the undercover work, the fear, the public reveal, I would. Because it led me to you, to us, to this life." Alexander leaned his head on Kai's shoulder. "And I would choose you every single time." The city lights twinkled below them, the same skyline that had witnessed their beginning. Kai understood now that the major case had never truly ended that night at the ceremony. It had simply transformed into the most important case of all. The case for living authentically. True or false? Revealing your true self always destroys the life you've built, or does it finally set you free?